Chapter 4, Section 3 talks about the different organelles and features that cells have. Their structures are mainly determined by the functions of each of their parts. So if you look here, this is just a refresher picture on prokaryotic cells versus eukaryotic cells. Now, prokaryotic cells are much more simplistic. They don't have the true nucleus in the center of the cell. They just have this nucleoid region. And they are not going to have all of these organelles that we discussed today, as do the eukaryotic cells. The plasma or cell membrane is the outer layer of an animal cell, and its function is to allow substances in and out of the cell. We call it selectively permeable because it will determine what things come across and it won't let other things come across. So because it has that choice, it's selectively permeable. And this is that phospholipid bilayer that we mentioned before. These are the little heads and these are the tail ends of that plasma membrane. So the membrane is made of two major parts. Like I mentioned, the phospholipid bilayer, where you've got the hydrophilic and hydrophobic parts. The hydrophobic, remember, does not like water. Hydrophilic does. And then in addition to lipids, you also have proteins that make up the membrane. There are proteins that are attached to the sides that are called peripheral proteins, and there are also integral proteins which are integrated throughout the entire length of the membrane. And what those proteins do is the peripheral proteins mainly act as attachment sites for certain molecules such as carbohydrates to attach to, or hormones, sometimes even viruses. And the integral proteins will form channels or pores to help to transport substances in and out of that membrane. We say that the cell membrane behaves as a fluid mosaic model, which means that it can flow similarly to a liquid, and mosaic meaning that the pattern can change. So these proteins have the ability to move locations depending on where they're needed in the membrane. One of the most important organelles is the nucleus, and within your animal cell you're going to have this nucleus, and that its job is to store the hereditary information, or the DNA, and to control all the cell processes. Now within this nucleus it has its own membrane around it, and that's called a nuclear envelope. And you can also see there's little openings in that. Those are nuclear pores. That's where material can enter and leave the nucleus. And also there is a darker portion inside of the nucleus that's called the nucleolus, and that's the area where the DNA is concentrated in, or the chromatin. This picture here are some animal cells, so you can see they're kind of roundish in shape, not perfect circles, but roundish in shape, and these dark areas are the nuclei. Mitochondria are another very important organelle. Mitochondria are where the ATP, or energy, is made, so they're called the powerhouse of the cell. And a unique feature about mitochondria is that they actually have their own DNA. So it was originally thought that they perhaps might have been early prokaryotic cells that have been surrounded or engulfed by eukaryotic cells, and they have since thrived and survived as this organelle rather than its own separate cell. The rough endoplasmic reticulum, or RER, its job is to make proteins, phospholipids, and also help to prepare molecules to be exported out of the cell to other locations in the body. And what's attached to it, it's a series of membranes, and you can see these little dots that are attached to it. Those are ribosomes. Ribosomes is where proteins are made, and that's what helps to give it that rough texture. The smooth endoplasmic reticulum, or SER, looks similar to the rough. It's still this system of membranes, but its job is to make lipids and steroid hormones. It also metabolizes or breaks down carbohydrates. It can regulate calcium levels, and it's also a place for a detoxification, so it can help to break down certain toxins that are in the cell. Ribosomes are also a very important organelle. Their function is to make proteins. So as I mentioned, some of them are attached to the rough endoplasmic reticulum. The ones that are attached to there make proteins to be shipped out of the cell. There are also little ribosomes that will float by themselves throughout the cytoplasm, and those ribosomes will make proteins for inside the cell. The Golgi apparatus looks kind of like the endoplasmic reticulum. It's also a system of membranes, and what its job is to store, sort, make modifications, and then ship materials out of the cell. There are many different types of vesicles that are inside the cell. Two of them that we'll discuss are lysosomes and peroxisomes. Lysosomes are going to break down macromolecules, so large molecules such as big sugars, carbohydrates, and they will help to release glucose into the bloodstream. They can also break down bacteria that enter the body. And they're just these little spherical shapes. Peroxisomes help to break down fatty acids. They actually help our liver and help to provide a way to break down some of the fats that can surround our liver and keep the liver functioning properly. The cytoskeleton is located in the cytoplasm, and it is the support system of the cell. Just like our skeleton is, it helps to allow the cell to have better movement and also some structure and strength. And it's made up of a couple different parts. They're called microtubules and microfilaments. And they're just like little skinny strands of proteins that help to give the cell some strength. Finally, animal cells also have cilia and flagella, or have the potential to have cilia or flagella. The cilia and flagella help in locomotion of the cell and also in movement of materials around the cell. So one of the most common examples of flagella is the tail that you see on a sperm cell. So that long tail is the flagella, and by moving that tail, that allows the sperm to swim. In this picture here, you're going to see the tiny little hair-like projections. Those are cilia, and that helps in moving the actual cell itself and also in moving particles surrounding the cell. So those types of organelles are only in animal cells. Plant cells do not have those.